Does President Trump have the leadership necessary to bring his own people in line as well as the Israeli side? Because I assure you, there are strong voices that do not want anything short of a military solution for Iran.
I'm skeptical, like a lot of other people. How do you have a conversation with people that believe in a caliphate, convert or die, and, you know, the notion that they've got to wipe Israel and the U.S. off the map? I don't know if it's ever going to be possible to get a deal with people that have that ideology and mindset. How'd it go?
Well, Sean, the president's message of peace through strength, it resonates throughout the world. This is not a threat on my part now. It is just a simple fact. The president means what he says, which is they cannot have a bomb. The conversation with the Iranians will be much about two critical points. One, enrichment. As you mentioned, they do not need to enrich past 3.67%. In some circumstances, they're at 60%. In other circumstances, 20%. That cannot be. And you do not need to run, as they claim, a civil nuclear program where you're enriching past 3.67%. So this is going to be much about verification on the enrichment program, and then ultimately verification on weaponization.
So you see, there was some cautious optimism on Witkoff's part there, but you could see Hannity teeing the whole thing up by basically saying, look, I don't see how you even have a negotiated settlement with these guys because they just want destruction and whatever else. It's almost like it doesn't matter what Witkoff is about to say because he's saying it just doesn't matter. We got to go get these guys. I mean, that's the implied statement there. And then Witkoff said, no, but, you know, that there's no reason for them to go over 3.67%. Well, that started a firestorm. The next day, Witkoff went, I don't know if it was on Fox, but one of the other networks, and he dropped that whole issue. Well, they don't need to reprocess anything. So obviously, there were some voices that didn't like it, whether that came from President Trump, whether that came from other pressures in the United States or from Israel. We don't know that part. We just know that he did change his stance that day. Well, now then, fast forward to, I think it was a couple of days ago, Secretary of State and National Security Advisor now, who's acting in that capacity, more on that another time, Marco Rubio went also on Hannity, and now he's addressing it. Now you're going to see a much more hawkish view from Rubio now as opposed to Witkoff's optimistic looking towards a negotiated settlement then, but also note how much more and directly hawkish Hannity is.
This is an opportunity for them if they take it. This is the best opportunity they're going to have. President Trump is a president of peace. He doesn't want a war. He doesn't want conflict. None of us do. And there's a path forward here. But what cannot happen is to live in a world where Iran has a nuclear weapon.
The path forward has been given to them, and now it's a matter of whether or not they're going to take it. And the president was very, very clear. He would lead the effort to stop them from ever achieving that nuclear weapon. And that would mean that statement was obvious in terms of that he would use military force to destroy those facilities.
And look, there's a win here for Iran, okay? They can actually have real economic development, have real investment in their country. But they have to walk away from sponsoring terrorists. They have to walk away from helping the Houthis. They have to walk away from building long-range missiles that have no purpose to exist other than having nuclear weapons. And they have to walk away from enrichment.
So all that has to happen, there's a great path forward here for Iran. All they have to do is completely demilitarize themselves, willingly surrender to everything that we say, and make themselves defenseless. I mean, that's a complete non-starter. What country in the world is going to say, yeah, we're going to take, especially in that missile capacity? When he said there's no other purpose for that, well, that's nonsense. Of course there's a purpose for having long-range missiles. It's to be able to defend yourself with conventional warheads, which is all they have right now, to be able to defend themselves. And why what rational person would say, I'm going to put a gun to your head and tell you to give me all your guns, even though you've got one too. And I'm going to say, look, just trust me. It can be good for you. All you got to do is give me all of your guns, all of your weapons, anything that can harm me, just lay them down and we'll be fine. And then we won't do anything. Trust me. Trust me. If it's irrational just in categorically for any nation to do that, even less for the Iranian side, because they have the experience with this president who already abrogated an agreement in the 2018 with the JCPOA nuclear deal. just at one time they got out of it, and said in part because it didn't include this new missile situation. But they had worked for like 2 years with the previous administration, Obama administration, on coming up together to have something they could both agree on. And it was quite intrusive on the Iranian side. It was very unpopular among many, but their leaders convinced them that there would be financial benefit for them, economic activity would improve because sanctions would be released, etc. And so they said, all right, we'll wait and see. So they eventually agreed to it. Obama was good to his word and a lot of that stuff. They did raise some of those sanctions, etc. The Iranian side, for the most part, met most of their requirements. And a lot of the material they had was shipped out of the country. I think a lot of it was delivered off to Russia, which was part of the negotiating teams that did all that stuff. So there were some cheating around the edges, but substantially less capacity, both with centrifuges, with what they could reprocess, how much they could store, etc. Had a 10-year time frame on it. And it didn't include the missile issue because that was a conventional deterrent. They weren't going to agree to that. But then because Trump came in, then didn't like the fact that ballistic missiles were not included. Then he said, okay, the whole thing's over and we'll get out of it. So now then the Iranians had trusted the American government, who at that time was led by Obama, and then the new guy comes in and just throws it all in the trash, just unilaterally withdraws from it. Now, why would anyone who had already trusted you once and been badly burned now trust you again? And oh, by the way, all you have to do is completely surrender every national security defense capability that you have and trust me. Obviously, that's not going to work. And so if that's the case, then we have a situation. And then what? You hear me say that all the time. It doesn't seem to resonate inside the White House or any other capitals in the West for that matter. Nobody seems to want to think about what comes next because Hannity's teeing it up pretty clear there. If we don't get these things, and now you see in a very hawkish way, Rubio saying there's a path forward as long as they do these things, and there's very little chance they're going to do them. So now then, Trump is again going to come into a situation to where either you capitulate and you roll over and you don't make good on that, or you're forced into making good on your claim, and then you actually go to war. And let me tell you, if this ain't Syria in the Bashar al-Assad days where you could launch some cruise missiles and blow up some stuff, and then they're just going to cower and go into a shell and lay down. There's very little chance that Iran is going to do that. They have much more capacity than the Syrian government ever had, and they're a huge country. I think it's like 3 times bigger than Iraq. And how did that war go, even with something that was a third the size of Iran, and that they didn't actually have any weapons of mass destruction, and they had almost no conventional capacity, and their ballistic missiles were these old scuds that were not accurate to anything, and they didn't pose any of a threat. We didn't even need to go in there. But when we did, they didn't have the capacity to do anything, and we see how that worked out. Iran also saw how that happened, and they've made sure in the years since that they do have the capacity to reach out and hurt somebody if they get attacked in a similar manner. So if you don't want to take my word for it or just look at the balance of power and the capabilities on each side, here's what the Ayatollah himself said about 2 weeks ago.
با مذاکره با آمریکا هیچ مشکلی حل نمیشه. دلیل تجربه مذاکره کردیم، امتیاز دادیم، کوتاه آمدیم، اما نتیجه‌ای که مقصودمون بود به دست نیاوردیم. همین معاهده را هم با همه این نقص‌هایی که داشت طرف مقابل باز خراب کرد، نقض کرد، پاره کرد. با یه چنین دولتی مذاکره نباید کرد. مذاکره کردن عاقلانه نیست، هوشمندانه نیست، شرافتمندانه نیست. ما اگر تهدیدمون بکنن تهدیدشون میکنیم، اگر این تهدید رو عملی کنن ما هم تهدید رو عملی میکنیم.
I said that was a couple of weeks ago. That was actually a couple of months ago. That was on February 7th. You saw in there. But the only thing that's changed so far is that the Ayatollah has made comments that in recent days that we'll talk to the United States, we'll engage in diplomacy, but we're not going to surrender. We're not going to surrender, but we'll see where things go. And so they've engaged. They've had the direct communications. There's been the 2 rounds of talks at least. I think there maybe have been more since then. And obviously that's a good thing to me. And, you know, like Ian Puddock likes to say when he's on our show, it's, talk is a lot better than war, quoting the former Prime Minister of UK back in World War II. That is certainly where I'm at right now as well. But you see these increasingly strident comments from both, you know, Hannity. Now, you understand, Hannity's not just some TV guy. He's got somebody that has a very close personal relationship with Trump himself. And I promise you, and we saw it all during the first Trump administration, they have a very close relationship, and Hannity's often telling him things. So he's directly in the president's ear. We know there's plenty of people in President Trump's inner circle that are very keen to taking this action. For probably ideological reasons, and certainly many of them are very pro-Israeli government positions and people, and there's lots of very high-level contacts between the governments. We know, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, several times he's been here in the White House not too long ago. Trump, like I think it was about 10 days ago, tweeted that I talked again to Benjamin Netanyahu, and we are eye to eye on nearly every topic. They didn't specify what those were, but obviously that the Iranian situation is very clear on that and very top. Trump himself has a couple of times said that if we can't get a deal, we're going to lead out on that. That's what he said. We are going to lead out on solving it the other way if we can't get it the right way. I think I've shown you here. Tom Cotton has been a fierce advocate. Again, somebody who has a relationship with Trump. General Jack Keane maybe doesn't have as much of a personal relationship, but emphatic that that's what we need to do. And you know who else is also emphatic on this? And no surprise, it's on the Israeli side. Now, I'm going to show you here something that I'm not Benjamin Netanyahu, sorry. This was Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister of Israel, who last October, before the election had even been held and we didn't know who was going to be president next, was asked, what is the Israeli situation and what is the Israeli view on solving the Iranian problem?
We've also rendered Iran's ability to defend itself. We've diminished their ability to defend themselves. And now it's time to hit the head of the octopus, the nuclear program and the regime itself.
You actually said that same thing on October 2nd following the ballistic missile attack on Israel. You said Iran had made a terrible mistake and that Israel had its greatest opportunity in 50 years to change the face of the Middle East. That was October 2nd. Have you lost that opportunity?
I don't think so. I think ultimately we should look at this in a whole perspective. And what matters is what we do next. Do we just let go of Iran and let them replenish themselves and fix their air defenses and then beginning rearming the whole octopus in Lebanon and Gaza? Or do we go all in and take out their nuclear program and ultimately help the Iranian people topple this terrible regime that's been ruining their own lives for the past decades?
So you see the Israeli position, they want regime change. They don't just want to be safe. They don't want to even get rid of this alleged nuclear weapons program, which Iran, according to our intelligence, doesn't actually have. They want regime change. And they view this, as he said there, he was referring to something that said about a week before that, quote, that Naftali Bennett views this as a once in a 50-year opportunity to finally go after Iran. That's what they've been looking for. They've been trying to do, and they thought this was their moment. Now, there was a lot of pressure by the Israeli government at the time, and Netanyahu, certainly behind the scenes, was trying to put pressure on Biden to get that done before the election or before he left office. They weren't successful. And of course, now then there has been some advancements and developments. One of the things that Bennett was concerned about there is we don't want to fail to take the advantage now, because that was at the time shortly after Israel had launched a bunch of missiles and taken out some radar sites and some other things near some of these nuclear facilities. He says, we don't want to give them time to rebuild. Well, they have. And of course, because of BRICS and because of Russia's military alliance with Iran, Now then, according to many reports anyway, they have S-400 and S-500 air defense systems in some key locations. So it is very unclear whether even American B-2 or the fighters that both the Israeli Air Force and the U.S. Air Force have in the region through some of our air power on our 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, whether they would be able to go in with impunity, as many seem to think even this day. It seems very unlikely. And of course, that's in addition to what I said is the Iranian ability to strike with ballistic missiles all throughout the Middle East, to include against American targets that are very vulnerable to Iranian missiles defense, missile batteries. So the question is going to get down to, what is America's interest here? Is there genuinely an America first foreign policy? Because if there is, then war with Iran isn't even on the table, because Iran does not pose a threat to the United States. If they ever attack us, if they ever choose to go to war with us, we have more than enough combat power that we can just render them completely impotent. And we have a great deal of firepower that we can deploy to the system. But if they don't attack us, there is no reason for us to go after them. As I've said many times, if you don't want them to have a nuclear weapons program, don't give them every reason in the world to make one. And that's unfortunately where we're going. And the idea that Hannity said there, and many others have said too, that the Ayatollahs are this fanatical religious group here that can't be deterred by normal means, like North Korea, like China, like Russia, etc., all the other nuclear weapons states. They say no, even though deterrence has worked since 1945 on every other state that's had them, it won't work here, so we can't risk it, so they say. What those advocates don't tell you, though, is when they say we can't risk that, so we will risk a war, they're oblivious, blind, or stupid, not sure which, but it's one of those three, to the consequences that could come back to us. We could get into another open-ended war. We could find that our ships get hit in the Red Sea against much more capable anti-ship capabilities that Iran has than even the Houthis have. They have smaller numbers. Or our troops in the region can get hit. Or our allies in the region can get hit. Oil facilities can be struck throughout the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz can be mined and just cause incredible chaos from that. And then you still won't have the issue with the nuclear weapon program. Now then, you've virtually certainly pushed them into having a covert nuclear weapons program. And we know that they have a lot of materials that they could reprocess to that high level. And if you go in there and you don't knock everything out, and some of these facilities that they have can continue the reprocessing, now then the next thing you have is a nuclear test, and all of a sudden the Rubicon has been crossed. And in the process of trying, you may lose B-1 bombers, you may lose F-18s, you may lose some of our ships. No one wants to talk about the consequence of that. And then just almost certainly this allure that you can bomb your way into a regime change is so alluring, and it's almost always a failure. And even in the few times it succeeds, you have complete chaos and disaster afterwards. What rational person can think that by taking out the Ayatollah, the Ayatollah regime, that you're going to get some pro-American something in its place? You have no idea what would come in its place. There would be complete chaos inside the country, and almost certainly devolve into a civil war like what we saw in Syria. Because even if you take out some of the senior leaders, I mean, there are a whole range of people inside the power ministries in that country. You can't kill everybody with bombs. And so they're still going to be in power. And if you have people try to rise up to take advantage of it, now then you've got a civil war. And you don't know how the civil war would turn out. All we know is that lots of people would be killed, that our interests would be harmed, and that the threat of terrorism would expand incredibly in the Middle East, and the violence would go up. Nobody wants to talk about that on these people who say we can't risk this. What the prudent and wise thing to do is to get this deal off the table, get this threat of war off the table, come to whatever accommodation we can have with Iran, and keep our deterrent very strong, so that if they ever act on anything, if they do anything, which they have shown since their inception in 1979, that they recognize the balance of power and that they are deterred from attacking us. And there is no reason whatsoever to think that that won't project another 50, 60 years into the future. There's no reason, because the dynamics that existed since 1979 will continue to exist into perpetuity as long as we don't cross a Rubicon and actually take the war to them directly and then see what they're going to do afterward, and then just have this blind, absurd hope that somehow things would work out better for us. That is just almost certainly not going to happen, and we don't need to find out. So if President Trump is truly an America First president, if he genuinely puts the interests of our country above any other country, even a close ally, then he needs to make sure we don't go to war here. Period. Unless we're attacked. I'll just categorically say it. Then every calculation is changed at that point. But if we're not directly attacked, there is no rational, no legal, no moral reason why we should go to war with Iran. That's the truth of it. And now you know too. Thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you guys always on a Saturday sticking with us here. We always do value your input. We value some of the comments that you make here. Gary's thrown a few of those up there, and we welcome you to continue to do that, even if you don't agree. And I know some of you don't, and I value that too. That's why we like this platform, because you get to actually interact with us. This is not just like watching some TV show. You actually get to engage with each other and sometimes with us too. Love that about this channel, because we don't have an echo chamber here. We had a guest on yesterday that a lot of people didn't like in some of the things, but listen, as I said on the very first show we published, we're not an echo chamber, and we're going to bring people on that you dislike, and if you want to complain about them, you're free to do that. We give you the space for it. So we do value you guys, and we are going to continue to be unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is, because you deserve it. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.